Very, very futuristic session wherein we have some space explorers, and so there's a set of investors and entrepreneurs seated beside me who are going to talk about the future of space exploration in India. So Manish, I'll start with you first and ask you, first if you could give a background of yourself for 30 seconds. So Manish, I'll first start with you because you have partnered with a lot of companies in space tech, you have invested in them. So what future do you see? What excites you about space tech?
No, I'll be honest with you. We have invested in two space tech companies, Bellatrix and Pixel, but that was never our plan. We never thought of ourselves as space tech investors. If we had thought, probably we would not have invested if we knew what was coming. We are very bottom-up, investors, great founders building great tech. We didn't think about the domain when we invested in AI in 2014. AI was not AI a decade back. AI is obviously a mainstream domain now. When we invested, it was not mainstream. If we had thought so much, as ourselves as an AI investor or a space tech investor, we would have probably found it harder. So by very bottom-up, great founders building great technology. If Yashas and Rohan were building, let's say, drones and not, a propulsion system, we would probably still have invested. Very bottoms up. But having said that, excited about space tech. Space tech has matured. Back when we met, 6-7 years back, and invested in Bellatrix, and there were, Galaxy and Skyroot and a few other companies that in Astrom and Exceed Space and multiple companies in that domain. They were the first generation or maybe the second generation of space tech entrepreneurs. They started companies, they were the real heroes. They started companies when there was no visibility of funding. There was no VC who was investing in space tech at that point of time. Now, if a space tech, a founder wants to start a company, there are literally dozens of funds who want one space tech company in their portfolio. Okay. Maybe there are 24 funds right now who at least have one space tech company in their portfolio now. And there are many more who are waiting to, fund one. These guys started, companies in an era where they were the first ones in particular domain. They did the hard work. They came in for the long haul. They didn't think, that if we start, we'll get the funding and it'll be easy for us in the next 2-3 years. It's been hard. Space tech has been hard. So, but anything hard excites us. And generally on space tech, see, 90% of today's satellites, maybe 95, they will have the exact numbers, are controlled by 3 countries in the world: US, Russia, China.
Yeah.
Rest of the world, I would say 85 to 90% of the countries have 0 to 3 satellites as a country. That's it. So there's a huge latent demand for space-based goods and services. And space tech is a global industry. It's not that you are building for India or you are building for India. Your competition is global, your customers are global, your investment is global, your supply chain is global, your employees are often global. So, space tech is global. So, it's a global opportunity, very, very large opportunity. ISRO has, created a vendor base of 400-500, support system of 400-500 vendors, which are, available to us, to all those, space tech founders. So, yeah, we are excited, obviously, about space tech. Okay. Sorry, long answer to your short question.
No problem. Rohan, I'll come to you. When you started pitching investors to fund in space tech, and of course, it's a space which comes with a long gestation period. You can't see immediate result in just a couple of years. So, how was your convincing style like? Were people knowledgeable enough or experienced enough to think about what future lies in space tech?
Okay, as Manish just mentioned, when we started Bellatrix, the investment ecosystem for space didn't technically exist in the country. So there were doubts. It is not just technology which was a problem. There was no policy in place. If you launch a satellite from India and you provide a subsystem, if it collides with other countries' satellite, who is responsible? There are no answers. This is just one example. So all these are covered under space policy. It was not vetted by the parliament. So investors' doubt is where is their money going? So that's one. Second, there was no framework as in what would ISRO do, what would private people do. So space was never viewed as an industry in our country, even though we had the best space agency in the world, ISRO, right? So later we all persevered and pushed the government, and government also realized the importance of space, because it's a global $450 billion industry as on today, expected to cross $1 trillion by end of 2030.
Yeah.
And with superpower like ISRO in India, why do we still have just less than 0.5% of the global market? So government thought about this. What is needed is only the private ecosystem in space. Private entrepreneurs can come, and as Manish said, it's a global industry. How can India contribute at least 10% of that $1 trillion? So that's why you see our Prime Minister becoming Minister of Space also. So wherever he goes, space is one of his favorite topics, which indirectly help the entire ecosystem. So we are the first company in India to raise a VC investment. It was hard, right? 4 or 5 years asking about orders, convincing. My other co-founder had to sit with government people on policy, etc., etc. 2018 there were 4 companies. 2025, 300 companies in space tech in India.
Ladies and gentlemen, that truly deserves a round of applause for the kind of work every company is doing in space tech.
So you might call it first mover disadvantage for us. It took time, but it helps. It helps the entire ecosystem, which we are happy, because you have to create a local demand. Yes, it's a global industry. Customers are there in US, but you need to create a local demand. China, for example, it's surviving because it has a huge local demand. So all of us need to work together to create that demand. So.
Sure. Interesting. Pranit, coming to you, how has been your experience like while raising funds for space tech company?
For us, I think we were in the better part of the journey compared to the guys here. Started in 21, and I think that was the time when everyone was investing left, right, and center all around, right? Space was not on the charts, certainly, but I think we, even from a funding standpoint, took it slow and steady, found the right kind of investors. It took us time to convince people that space was not just a fancy investment and actually a business investment, right? And that time came in right when we started seeing the funding winter come in and essentially no investments in any sector, right? And space being a risky sector took an even more backseat. So we had to convince our investors to say, hey, you know what? We are not building space for the sake of it, right? We're not building it because we want to be called space scientists. We're building it because we want to build a business out of it. And that's how I think all the companies you see today, if they're getting funds, which means they have a business model on table, right? You wouldn't see any fancy investments. And I think with that, so from having extremely enthusiastic people who just want to take bets, to then going into a phase where people are now beginning to question everything as to how you're going to make money out of it. And today, essentially, for the lack of a better word, just the FOMO world, right? That, like how Manish was mentioning, I want a space tech investment. So we're seeing that, that journey that the industry has taken from a VC standpoint. But what this has resulted in, for example, companies at our stage, wherein we have a technology set which is fairly proven and are looking to scale further, you need that growth capital. Right, and that's something that we see the industry now warming up on, and it's not there yet, but we're seeing good signs for it to warm up and take that next leap.
Okay. So Manish, I'll come to you again. Since you have invested in a couple of companies, I mean, when you see about the ideas and the way they are developing the new concepts, do you think there is space for more companies to join in? Like you mentioned, from 15, we've now moved to 300. So if young innovators, young entrepreneurs are still thinking about entering this space, what new which still lies, unmatched?
The bar, or let's say the barrier to entry of entering into space tech has come down. Partly because there's more funding available, partly because these guys have sort of inspired people, partly because these guys themselves got inspired by Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos of the world maybe a decade or two back. So their success stories are inspiring others. At the same time, like I said, the bar is coming down a little bit. People are starting because it's easier to start. There is much more support available. There is, for example, there is a poem, product available by ISRO now, where you can launch a product in space with relatively little investment and test it out. So versus having to raise hundreds and thousands of maybe millions of dollars and building satellites and sending your products outside India and partnering with somebody and launching it in space, or having a lot of government support, the NSILs of the world and the in-spaces of the world. A lot of government support has come around today. So it's generally become easier. So whether we like it or not, a lot of people are also now, I won't call it copying, but imitating what other people have been building earlier. So there are a lot more rocket launching companies now. There are a lot more propulsion system companies, or a lot more SAR imaging companies now. Maybe 5 years back, they were the only ones, maybe there was only one in each of these domains. I would rather expect people to come up with something they feel passionate about, they can build for the next 10 years or 15 years, rather than going on somebody else's conviction that this person has built and we can also build, or I can build better. I would expect some people to build bases on their own strengths and the passion they can bring, because it will take more than a decade. This guy's been at it for a decade now. Yeah. They've been at it for half a decade. So it's not a few years game. It's longer and harder for any startup. I'm saying even Zomato has been around for almost 2 decades now. Absolutely. Flipkart has been around for 1.5 decades now. Only now you can call it a Zomato and a Flipkart. So when you should have the conviction of going after something for a decade, 1.5 decades, giving your life to it. So that's something we would like to see people, building innovation or building companies which they can feel strongly about. Even when the going gets tough, the money may not be available, the product may not be going their way, the people may not be joining them. There'll be tough days. Yeah, so there is obviously scope there. And as investors, we don't know, it's very easy to do top-down thinking for us as well as you, for anybody, that, hey, you should build into this. But that's not the way to invest, at least from my perspective. The way to invest is great founder building great technology, will back them. Rather than you should build in this because there's a gap area here. If there's no technology breakthrough, there's no scientific breakthrough, why should we invest? Why will we invest? At least we look at it that way. Great founder and great innovation. At least that's our thesis of investing.
Okay. But as VCs, patient capital is not something which we typically attach to with VCs. It's something which we see as also part, right? So, how LPs are also further convinced that, okay, this has got long gestation. Returns are going to come in later on in a decade or so.
So, answer varies for different VC funds and different LPs. A lot of individual LPs or smaller family offices, if they're LPs, they'll think differently. Then techies who are LPs, who understand, things take time, or institutional investors who think this take time. And there's always conflict. As a LP, you want the investor managers, VCs, to invest in companies which will build something good, but at the same time they want their money back in 5 years with profits. Both of these cannot coexist, and it's always a struggle. And that's the part of the problem we are solving. We need to solve. People are now pushing, don't have 10-year fund life cycles, 12-year fund life cycles, go for 7 years, 8 years. How can you invest in a Bellatrix and expect to see results in 5 years and get your money 10x in 5 years? It's just wrong. Then you are wasting your money. You are throwing your money at the wrong way. Then you should rather not invest. So there is a constant struggle. There is a constant challenge. More than VCs, now there are more avenues. There are, let's say, professional angels, or family offices, or global funds who are coming to back space tech startups. So there is hope there also. VC is probably the first round. We can seed and we can diligence the companies and bring the round together. But a lot more capital is slowly becoming available at early stages. Late stages is still a gap area in India, not just for space tech, but broader deep tech. It's still a gap area in India.
Okay. Rohan, coming to you, like you mentioned in the start, when you began, of course, funding was a problem, and not many startups were there, government initiatives, and everything was a miss. So when you compare it now, are there new set of challenges which you are facing in your growth stage?
It's a very good question. See, what you see is now access to capital is easier for seed stage companies and until Series A, right? But the real perseverance or real win for the both the startup and for the investors is who crosses Series A and gets into the growth stage, right? That's where you create real value, and not many companies will sustain that long. So this needs perseverance. There is good value. The return is very good. But if you just see the companies which can stay that long, enter into the growth stage, is one of the goals. But the problem is this: in India, access to growth stage capital for deep tech is still not matured. So, as if you were in the US, that would have been easy access to growth stage capital. So here, founders spend more time raising money than innovating on the product and getting the product market ready. So that is a challenge, because access to growth capital, it's not that India doesn't have money. Investors or family offices do not have that conviction to take a larger bet. Yeah. But the good side of things is there are not many companies who can sustain till the growth stage. So there are few on which you can confidently take a bet. So there is a challenge as well as a solution. So that's what we see.
Sure. So Pranit, apart from capital, what else has been the most challenging part for you in your startup journey?
So I think for us it has, the other challenging part apart from capital has been the business side of it, right? The reason I say the business side of it, traditionally space and satellite imagery as a technology has always been very centered around defense. And defense till date occupies more than 60% of the market. Right? So as a business, to become an investable business, right, you can't rely only on defense. There's a very limited set of conviction that you can have on the cash flows, on the dynamics and the risk that it involves, right? So for us, I think it's been a lot of time and effort on how do you show and justify space as a dual use technology and not just surround yourselves with tenders and bid documents and just focus on defense as a sector. So for the last 3 years, we've spent, for instance, a lot of time in evangelizing a lot of non-defense use cases. So we work with a bunch of agriculture companies. Some of the largest conglomerates are our customers. We are evangelizing something on the disaster response, on the urban mapping. Essentially, a lot of these non-defense use cases coming in make technology a lot more accessible and take it towards the journey of commoditization, not today, but a decade ahead, right? And that, I think, is a challenge that technologies like ours face, where if you are building systems for the satellite, then your target market is the space ecosystem which is evolving, right? But if you are building technologies like satellite imagery and analytics, your target market is no longer the space ecosystem. You want users in the agriculture industry, you want users in the insurance world, you want users in the let's say the gas pipelines world to appreciate what satellite imagery can do and hence open their wallets for it, right? So that awareness, that leap has been a fairly challenging and exciting journey that we've been able to take, and for a fact, I think all companies in the space are already wrapping their heads around what else can they do to bridge that gap.
Okay. So Rohan, what new innovations are you excited about in space tech?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I would like everyone to know that space is one industry where the technology which you build has multiple use cases in other industries as well. In fact, the word software was coined for the first time for the Apollo lunar landing. That's when the first code of software was written. But software now is a big industry in itself. Yeah. Materials which are used in space, it needs to be lightweight, etc., now are used in prosthetics. So the use case, to filter astronauts' urine in space, those membranes are used for dialysis now. So, for example, the engines we do, the other use cases we are using it to, replace RO water. So RO membranes are expensive. So that's space technology for you. But what we see in the future is everybody is talking about clean energy, green energy, climate change is a big thing. How space actually plays a major role in combating climate change. We as humans are still class 0 in the evolution of species, meaning we are dependent on the Earth's natural resources for our survival. The resources are finite, they're not infinite, and it is harming the planet. So mining on the moon is no longer science fiction, it is a hard reality. So that's why NASA's Artemis Accords is mainly not for science. You want companies to go there and start mining on the moon because let's not go to Mars or asteroids, far away. So moon is a good place with abundance of minerals present there. So how do you bring it at a fraction of a cost? Gold is available underneath the ocean. You don't mine because cost of mining is more than the value of gold. Similarly, why don't I get now things from moon is because the transportation cost is expensive. Bellatrix is solving the transportation issue to make it cheaper. So that's how you see the future heading, and that's what makes it exciting.
Interesting. So Manish, coming to you again, apart from capital, where else, any examples or anecdotes you want to share, you have helped your investee companies in space tech?
So obviously we don't even understand a fraction of what these guys are building. Our support is very, very, I would say superficial, to use a very generic term. Sometimes we help with, let's say, something as simple as hiring candidates or interviewing candidates.
Okay.
Interviewing candidates or helping connect with, let's say, some potential customer, or, connecting with future round of investors. That's what we have done in the past. Let's say Pixel Series A round, the connection was, made by one of GrowX partners, right? So, we help, all our portfolio companies, not just in space tech, but deep tech also there broadly, to with guidance wherever we can, next round, support. I think these are the broad things we help with. There's very little we can do in terms of product development or technology or anything else. These are mostly peripheral stuff, right? We are ourselves working on building a team in-house which will scour our own networks and our investors' network, LPs network, and create a database where we can more actively, proactively help our founders meet the right people, meet the right customers. But that's just that's something work in progress. But I'll be honest with you, we feel if there is a rocket ship, investor cannot make more than 5% difference to their journey, this way or that way, positive, negatively, we can just latch on to their rocket ship.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So Pranit, any anecdote you wish to share, how investors would have helped you in treating the path?
I think investors play a very significant role, right? Especially because this is no longer just about money. Like I said, it is a journey that all of us are taking together. Neither are the investors people who've invested in 2 generations of space startups and now looking for the longer leap, nor are the founders guys who've lived 2 decades of space innovation and building a 3rd one. So I think all of us are learning together. Right? Now, where things change and really become very interesting is, I'll take an example from our journey. So when we closed our previous round, we got in a very interesting investor on board, which was Infosys. So Infosys invested in us from their balance sheet, right? So not their founders, not the family offices, but Infosys as an entity invested in us. And that was about 2 million, which is a very significant investment for a company like theirs in a space kind of an industry. Now, why were they interested and why were we keen? So it was a very mutual synergy for us to say, we are giving you satellite imagery, right? And satellite imagery is one data source you have, right? You can't rely on one data source to make industry decisions. And Infosys as an entity comes in and says, okay, you give me the satellite data, I will do the broader solutioning for it. Right? So they are now enabling the downstream applications. For instance, BFSI is a very large market for them. So they are now working on how can they use imagery data to revamp their existing BFSI solutions to their banking and insurance customers. To say, with this, how do their customers have an edge? Right? And that is where space as an industry begins to impact the downstream. Right? So Infosys as a partner would, as let's say a company independently would have always looked at space. But the moment they come in and say, hey, you know what, we want to invest and come on the cap table, shows the very strategic intent that companies like theirs want to have. Right? And I think that is a very unique anecdote that I'd put up, that investors coming with a very strategic mindset to say, hey, you know what, I respect and value the technology that you have, but I want to take that to the next level, right? And that extension is important for all of us.
Okay, interesting. So before I open the floor for questions, I mean, one piece of advice each one of you has for future entrepreneurs who are getting into the space tech space.
Okay, so space is unforgiving. If your product fails in space, you can't send a service person to repair. So be focused on quality engineering and learn to persevere, because as I said, the gestation period here is little longer. But now access to technology is getting better each day with AI, and also that your iterations will come down. So you need not worry as much as we worried about. The gestation period will come down. But please do persevere till you see the product as a fit. And again, please understand the user ecosystem. So don't build products with a research mindset. So that will help you win a lot of orders in the space sector, because it's a big win or a big loser here in the space industry. So that's what I would advise. Thank you.
Manish, would the venture capital industry support more space tech entrepreneurs? Do we have more capital for them?
No, sure. And one point to what Rohan said, definitely build resilience. Second is build the research muscle, but also not a counterpoint, but more like a don't lose sight of customer. A lot of deep tech founders in general are in love with technology. That's the reason they started the company. That's where the comfort zone is. But in space tech, in general hardware, general deep tech, you can't build it in-house for 5 years and then go to customers and say, I built it. You have to start baking into the product, the customer feedback early on. You can't iterate like software later on. Your systems and processes are hard-coded. Your hardware is hardly built. The hardware is built already. So give disproportionate. It's uncomfortable for them to go out and build customer relationship or partnerships and spend time with those side. But do that early on. That's the only suggestion. We have seen many of people in general in deep tech. They love that. The reason for them to start the company is the love for tech, and that's where they want to spend their most time. But that may or may not become a business early on, and that's when the struggle with funding also comes in, because internal investors, existing investors, see the technological progress, incremental one, or on the technology and the product. But the external investors need to see more quantitative progress, and that can only come with external conversations, external relationships, customer relationships, partner relationship. So do that sooner than later. That's the only suggestion.
Okay. Pranit?
No, I think I would fully agree, and that would be the prime advice to build for the user than the love for tech. I think that was very well put. The other thing to add is space as an industry for entrepreneurship is still in its early stages, right? So do not focus on building something that one person is giving you X and you promise an X plus 1, right? So don't just compete on one particular variable value and say, hey, you know what, I'm 10% better than that person. I think we're too early to have those sorts of fights. We should rather be debating on what are those disruptive ideas that you can come up with. And I think there's a lot of room for that, right? We're, of course, all of us independently are fighting for efficiency in the problem statements. So we don't want someone to come up and say, hey, you know what, he's building a system with efficiency X and I'm doing it X plus 1 and hence my system is better, and that is why you should either buy my product or fund into me and so on, right? I think that's a journey that all of us are taking. There's a lot more room to build disruptive tech because there are enough opportunities lying out there, and hence not just do a cut, copy, paste plus 1, but look at it from a very different lens, and that I think could go a long way in how the industry is shaping.